We are back and we are now joined by Abigail Arunga joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm hoping you're in Nairobi, Abigail.
Yes, sir.
Joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. And
Oh,
she is coming and she's telling us, okay. It looks like we have lost Abigail and we are trying to reconnect with her. But yes, an interesting show. If you don't know, coming ahead, we've got Abigail. There she is. She's back. Abigail, right-hand
Hi,
columnist and opinion shaker and maker in Kenya. How are you doing, my sister?
I'm doing good, except for these random technical difficulties. Sorry about that.
That is absolutely fine. It happens. I think there is maybe a Zionist behind them trying to ensure you don't join me.
Lioness spoil everything.
I'm telling you. And now, speaking about that, let's walk our listeners back to the kibbutz that is, starting with the collapse of the illegally constructed Solai Dam. What happened there in 2018 with 48 people losing their lives?
So, you know how there's sometimes where you're watching the patterns, but you're not sure if it's the pattern, almost like you're gaslighting yourself into thinking, this can't be related to that. That's not possible. But like in a very strange coincidence, right? The Solai Dam collapsed in the area around Nakuru and killed thousands of people, and lots of people were displaced and they didn't have homes. The contextual irony is that the Kenyan government usually knows when there's a flood happening or a drought happening or something like that, because that's their mandate to know and predict such things. So there's a lot that they can predict coming and don't do anything about, right? So when the Solai Dam collapsed, it was a terrible tragedy and a lot of people lost their lives. And then coincidentally, when you forward to late 2025, now 2026, we hear that the Israeli government is in partnership with the Kenyan government, which it has been for a while, by the way, again, contextually. There's certain, products we stock in our supermarkets. There's certain, even musicians, even like into the arts industry that we support, encourage, and enthuse, are enthusiastic about, that are, backed by the Israeli government. Anyway, so the Israeli government in partnership with the Kenyan government wants to buy huge tracts of land to apparently help Israeli teenagers and Kenyan teenagers get along in like a strange dystopian exchange program that no one asked for, wants, or cares about. So it could be coincidence, but with the world going on as the world is going on, I think we're learning pretty quickly that nothing is a coincidence. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
I absolutely agree. In setting up this kibbutz, because this is clearly what it is from wherever we're looking all over Africa and the world, in setting up this kibbutz, Abigail, are there any people who've been displaced? We know that Nakuru is in the Rift Valley, which is one of the richest area land-wise in Kenya.
So, aside from the time of the Solai Dam, right, there were people displaced then, and there's definitely people displaced now, and there's definitely going to be people displaced if somehow this doesn't stop, if the people don't protest, if the people don't rise up, if we don't actively refuse, right? Historically in Kenya, just to give a little bit more context, ever since we started having multi-party elections, there has always been violence every year in the Rift Valley area, which is where Nakuru is situated. If you look back in our history, from when we started having multi-party elections, which was 82 after the coup, Nakuru and the Rift Valley have always been a site of violence. People always lose their lives. There's always a tragedy. And it's extremely unfortunate because a lot of it is not necessarily conflict among the people, but it's instigated conflict, if you understand what I mean. Like, it's not them who are like, all of a sudden I've woken up and hated my neighbor. There is there are active strategies in place. There are active situations, and policies and people and even media integrated into this campaign to make sure that people fight against each other, because somehow for 5 years it's peace, and then right at election year something happens in that specific area all the time, and different people are always blamed for it, different tribes are always blamed for it, but it's a deliberate instigation, kind of reminiscent of the Rwandi's genocide, where it's on purpose and people are told certain things and made to believe certain things that are not true, but it's always conveniently around that time. So bringing that to our conversation, right? The elections for Kenya are next year in 2027. So again, could be another coincidence, but somehow all of this is, building up and coming to a head right in the year that people are starting to campaign and talk about elections, because the election propaganda starts 2 years before, and we're going into elections next year, August, literally a year and a half from now. So the fact that this is also coming out now, people are being displaced now, we're talking about giving our land once again, and these are just the deals we know, but we're talking about giving our land away again to a foreign power for nothing, that is of no benefit to the Kenyan people whatsoever.
So when Eretz Rivkin, who is the Israeli investor, quote unquote, made this announcement of this exchange between Kenyan youths and Israeli youths through this place that he was building, there was a whole lot of onslaught from the defense forces known as Kenyans on Twitter. And immediately, not long after, there was this big revelation that, there's been a cache of arms for Al-Shabaab that have been found, which of course turned out to be arms that were allegedly same picture as 2022. What goes on in there, and Kenyan civil society, whether on Twitter or in person, because you guys have been really turning up since 2024, are they starting to say, nah, this doesn't make sense?
Honestly, Zukiswa, you've touched on 14 different points. First of all, I am a card-carrying member of our only opposition in Kenya, which is Kenyans on Twitter. And of course, sometimes we can, get derailed and get infiltrated and all those things. That happens all the time. Like, we are sometimes compromised, and that happens. But I think on the Israeli influx, we've had one voice. So Kenyans on Twitter are so important. I think we also have to really pay attention to the fact that governments keep trying to repress, going into parliament to talk about let's stop TikTok. That's what they talk about in parliament. You know what I mean? I think we have to really pay attention to why these governments are so intent on doing something like that, when they claim that journalism is nonsense and, newspapers are used for going to the toilet. Our president literally said that one time. The fact that they're constantly trying to suppress all of the conversations that are going on online. In fact, there was just a landmark case where a student was arrested for a picture, basically portraying an AI picture of Ruto's funeral, and he's been in court, and he was just released yesterday because of a lack of evidence. I think we really need to pay attention to how much power we have in that respect. Onto what you're saying about what I call the consistent oppression playbook, where someone says something and Kenyans on Twitter, whoever is the opposition, pays attention, and there's a furor and a fracas and everything like that. And then they give us another news item, which you mentioned, right? They give us another news item to kind of like distract us from this other thing that's going on. It's a consistent and constant oppression playbook that not only the Kenyan government, but governments all over the world, but like I really obviously see it in Kenya because I'm Kenyan, use to distract people from what is actually going on, right? And they do this again pre-election. It's literally the pre-election playbook. When we look back at our history, which is why I was also bringing the context of what happens every year before elections. If we look back at our history, this is literally what they do every time. And to your question of whether Kenyans on Twitter have paid attention to and seen and understood the patterns, because we have been making noise about this since 2024. We've been making noise about a lot of things. And the fact that they understand what, not compassion fatigue, what's the word I'm looking for? Like bad news fatigue. I can't remember what the correct term is, but they really overwhelm you with all of these things happening at the same time. It's the same thing they're doing with the Epstein files, because they know no one is going to read 3 million pages of assault, you get overwhelmed and you stop paying attention to it. In the same way, the Kenyan government just brings things like, our buzzword triggers, Al Shabaab, Somalia, immigrant. They just keep, triggering you, and you get so triggered, you fall, or you run the risk of falling, or you fall into inaction. So yes, I would say that we are paying attention. I would also say that the government is doing this deliberately. I would also say that when you watch where the money goes, you see what the government is trying to do. And I really would like to caution people to pay attention to what's going on around them and stick to the cause that you can stick to, follow it through to the end, because there's so many things happening at the same time, unfortunately. But our only power is in how much noise we make in our spaces, whether online and offline. Because we've seen this before, and we've seen it work before. We've seen our opposition work before. And that's why it's so important to keep doing it. Even if you have to, Kenyans call it when you tipo, like you hand the shift over to someone else so you can have a week of rest, then you tipo back and you get back in the game. Then you tap out. Is that what it's called in boxing? Where you hand over to your, like that. We have to keep doing that. Because the struggle must continue. I don't know if you've been watching. Please cut me off if I'm going.
No, absolutely. I'm not going to cut you off, because we need to continue this conversation. It's not just a Kenyan conversation. It's a continental conversation. But we have to take a small commercial break so that we pay for the lights and the water, and we will continue this conversation in a minute.
Lights and water. Okay.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings, from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan. You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
And we're back with Abigail Arunga, who is speaking to us from Kenya. Abigail, your president says that he is a Christian. And what do we say to Christians in Kenya and all over the world who say, well, the God of Israel? How do we say anything? Is there anything to say?
Once again, you've touched on 4 points at the same time. You said our president. I didn't vote for him. I'm kidding. But
unfortunately, we recognize him as your president, friend.
It's not nice. Wow. That's such a sensitive issue. Our colonization was so intense and so well done that we completely discarded our original religions, traditions, and cultures. And when you take away a belief system, much like the way you take away an addiction, you have to replace it with something else. So they replaced it so fiercely and so violently that we've come to a point where Africans are so detached from our original ideas of sense, of logic, of belief, of culture, of tradition, that when someone says they're Christian, which is a thing that happens all over the world, of course, if you're a colonized nation, as soon as someone says they're Christian, or like if you function in a Muslim state, etc., everything is somehow forgiven. And so I'm going back to what I called before the break, the oppression playbook. Part of the oppression playbook is, number one, distraction. Number two, religion. When you attack people's religions, they take it as an attack on their personal selves. It's so much so that our faiths make us unable to see clearly or reason clearly. And I'm not saying that this is the same case for Christians, but it is definitely the case for anyone who thinks that the president of Kenya is a Christian, because he has done multiple unchristian things. If we're just going by the logic, right? If we're quoting the Bible, if that's what we got to do. Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace. This is the guy who called us treasonous criminals. Patience. He has no patience for the revolution. Kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. This man has none of the above. He's constantly spewing lies. It's very interesting to watch the parallels between Trump and Ruto, right? Because they both claim to be Christians. They both claim to be doing all these things that are easily verifiable to be untrue. They're both really leaning on their Christian faith and statements that, I don't know if you listened to Trump's State of the Union address, that was just full of lies. Our president does the same thing.
Do not like listening to Trump, and I don't like listening to Ruto, and I do not like listening to Idi Mnangagwa, and I do not like that people I don't like to listen to. I don't like listening to.
I completely agree. So people offer summaries. Actually, it's part of my everyday feminism to be able to say that I don't know what my president sounds like because I do not deliberately listen to him. So I might read a transcript, for example, or they'll be talking about it in the news and they'll, highlight, basically what he said. So not that I've listened to him. Sometimes I can avoid it, if I'm in a public space and he's speaking. But the Christianity question is so delicate because Africans and Kenyans particularly really hinge their whole identity on whether this person is a Christian or not. So it's more important for Kenyans for you to say that you're a Christian than for you to act like a Christian, regardless of whether we have glaring proof of the opposite. So back to your question of the God of Israel. It's interesting that people say that because the God of Israel doesn't actually like us. I'm just saying, we're like the Gentiles and the black people. Like, if you read the Bible, it's not for you guys. Like, it's not for us. It's not to us. But if we're going to be really pedantic about it, there's no way that the God of Israel would support what is going on now. If we're talking about going with the precepts of Jesus, if we're going with the New Testament God, because the Old Testament God was an angry guy, I get it. But the New Testament God, which is what the Christian faith is based on, says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Absolutely. Israel's neighbor is the state of Palestine. That is not loving your neighbor as you love yourself, right? If we're just going on a basic checklist basis, the God of Israel would not be pleased with what the Israelis are doing. Dare I say, right? if you are actually a Christian person, you know that this is not what Christianity means, whether that's talking about genocides, whether that's talking about the Epstein files, whether that's talking about our presidents slash dictators slash despots that are basically running the world with rules that don't apply. If you're saying that you're Christian and you follow the rules of the Bible, that's a lie.
Yeah. I call them ice boys for empire, really, because they seem more interested in pleasing their master's voice than they do in pleasing us, unless it's election year and they want our votes.
Oh my gosh.
For those few months.
Is this the case in South Africa as well?
Like, it's the case all over this continent, my sister. But something came to my attention as well, and I think we'd like to address this because resources is such a big thing in Africa, and our constant colonization and recolonization and neocolonization. And in 2012, oil was discovered in Kenya. And how is are you like now like the big deal, the big kahuna of the continent? And should we start applying for jobs? Should we tell our engineers, because we have unemployed engineers in South Africa, to come through to Kenya because, hey, our brothers and sisters that side have work because they are, how's that going?
So, Kiswa, why would you take that tone with me? Why?
No, I'm genuinely asking.
It's not me. It's not me. Okay.
Well,
was discovered.
What enlighten our readers about this particular situation?
Oil was discovered, and they set up a whole company. A couple of companies, actually. One of them was a Tullow Oil company, and they were supposed to start the refinery process thing to take out the crude oil from, the ground and take it to wherever it needs to be taken to. Nothing has happened since. I know people who, worked for those companies and, their jobs have changed and those are no longer their jobs. And so to the oil question, I was actually worried. I don't know if this happens to you when you see something has been discovered. I was worried.
Yeah, no,
I was like, America's going to descend for oil, do the same thing they did to...
The United States has been there for a while,
Maybe yeah, it has already. So it was only sorry, I don't know why I said descend, like there's not already, but, in a worse way, if that's possible. I thought that was going to
the way they've
change
descended
something,
on Nigeria,
but I don't know if
for instance.
Exactly. So when I look at Nigeria, who's still fighting this battle, like to this day, teetering on the edge of not banana republicanism, but like failed states. I don't know, like there's something that finding things in Africa that are supposed to be useful does to a country. Even when you look at Sierra Leone, right, which is one of the most mineral rich, if not the most mineral rich country in the world, the civil war that is constantly being funded, even in the Congo, honestly, it is a continental problem, made me a little bit scared when they found oil. It hasn't really gone anywhere. I don't know if it was just a vehicle to pretend we had oil and then steal some money. I don't know. To my knowledge, there were a couple of bags of oil that were, processed, but nothing. Really. I mean, you know what happens when you find oil in a country? You can literally see the American helicopters welling in, like the Navy SEALs landing, and that hasn't. That hasn't happened.
I'm going to send you a really interesting interview. But a really interesting interview. They did find the oil, but I think your parliament has actually just voted to give the rights to a certain company, and we know who generally has rights to certain companies.
To certain companies.
As
there were a few bags, like I said, there were a few.
Yeah.
There were resources that were found and released and sold to we don't know who. So like something did happen. We just
Abigail, we need to wrap up. And as we wrap up, thank you so much for this fantastic conversation. It's been enlightening. It's been educative, and I hope that everybody realizes the importance from this conversation and all the conversations we've been having of international solidarity, because we need to be as global in our solidarity as they are in their profits and in their exploitation of us. Abigail, 1 term or 2 term before we finish?
Oh my gosh. How dare you? No term. Yeah. Thank you, Vikiso, for having me. And thank you for everything you do for all the causes. And the next time I see you, I'm taking your shirt. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Bye.
We are done with Abigail. We are going to go into our mid-morning Ramadan, but just now we go on break. After our mid-morning Ramadan quiz, we will also be coming up with Job Loon and then end with Susan Abulawa. Listen to it. It's going to be an exciting hour.